Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today I'm going to be covering this book, The Jaguars' Shadow, written by Richard Mahler. I do not know where exactly the cover for this. I don't know exactly where the jacket for this book is, but when I purchased it at Coas for $9, it did have its jacket. The subtitle for this book is Searching for a Mythic Cat. It is copyright 2009. It's 326 pages of content, starting with a preface that reads, "I'm not a scientist. This is not a science book, even though it touches on natural history and summarizes research. Those seeking detailed information about the biology and ecology of jaguars are better off looking elsewhere. Neither am I an archaeologist or anthropologist, so the same admonition applies for these domains. I am a layman journalist who writes for a general audience. My goal is to bring the story of a little known and widely misunderstood animal to the public at large. Jaguars have had a long, complex association with humans, and this relationship deserves to be explored in an accessible way before the big spotted cats disappear. The threat of extinction in the wild for this species is very real, and jaguars could vanish from the forest within our lifetimes. Many large carnivores, in fact, face a problematic future. Tigers, for example, were reduced by 2008 to a mere 7% of their original range. Let us pause to consider what is at stake for large felines and how we may change our course while there is still time to avoid a dire outcome." The chain that links the chapters of this book is my personal quest to encounter a jaguar in the wild. Was I driven by ego and sentimentality? You be the judge. Did I finally see one? You'll have to keep reading in order to find out. So that's a good opening. There's more to that introduction. I'm not reading the entirety of it, but this book is very similar to American Buffalo, American Wolf, Heart of a Lion, The Beast in the Garden, A Shape in the Dark, that one about Kodiak bears. A lot of the books I've discussed on this channel are similar in style to Richard Mahler's book about jaguars. They start covering the prehistory into the history, human interaction with it into the modern issues surrounding the creature, as well as a personal quest to see this in the wilderness. This book is very information dense, however, and I think at times it drags on. I liked the book and I would recommend it to others, but I think you really need to have a certain stubbornness or mental stamina to get through this book without putting it down. It gets boring at a couple times. So there's that. The main snippets I wanted to point out are partly why I discussed Shadowcat last week. On page 42, we know least about them. Richard discusses Warner Glenn. Warner Glenn presents 10 color plates from his 1996 Peloncillo Jaguar encounter along the Arizona-New Mexico border. The rancher's images are startling and dramatic. The most compelling was made into a poster, a copy of which hangs in my dining room. It is a sidelong view of the mature male jaguar bayed by Glenn's dogs. The jaguar's chunky head is turned toward the camera, eyes glaring, its ears pulled back in an expression of defiance. The cat is crouched on a promontory beneath a milky sky, with a sweeping panorama of the parched San Bernardino Valley and green Chiricahua Mountains, a magnificent sky island that looms in the background to nearly 10,000 feet. A pinon pine obscures the tail and rear legs of the animal, whose muscular physique appears as tense as a coiled spring. The cat was not panting or out of breath, Glenn said, in describing the moment at which he took the poster photo. He was quietly watching the dogs, then me, and then the dogs again. The Jaguar charged the picture taker a few minutes later, but the attack was thwarted when a whirlwind of agitated tracking hounds jumped in between the two. Shortly thereafter, Glenn retrieved his dogs and the Jaguar slunk away. In a 4-page handwritten letter, Glenn told me he took his 1996 sighting to mean that maybe we are doing something right and that just maybe Jaguars can and are making a comeback. He speculated that the spotted cat felt at home in the Boot Heel and southeast Arizona because he likes what he's found, a rugged place with plenty of game and few people. Now, as I discussed in last week's video, Warner Glenn is a hunter, someone who's lived in the southeast corner of Arizona for all his life and hunts mountain lions out there and guides for hunts of mountain lions as well. But this is a man who also passionately loves the creatures he hunts. This is someone who, even though he sees jaguars as a menace to livestock, he also sees them as the beautiful thing they are, as a predator that is expanding its territory into a place that is perfect for it, where there are very few humans, where there is plentiful game, and where there is good habitat for it. A bit later, on page 110, is a section in the chapter Jaguars Possess the Power of God. And it's about the kind of Mexican and Central American interactions with jaguars in those regions. The carved jaguars stopped me in my tracks, I told the resident caretaker, Nazario Ku, a Maya who worked closely with researchers who restored the masks in 2002. They're haunting. Ku, a diminutive man with slender hands and alert eyes, replied, "You're not alone, friend. Those tigers have protected that building for centuries. They must be doing a pretty good job because they've withstood many attacks and are still very solid." Jaguars, when the Spanish first came out here, were called tigre, which the Spanish, when they first came out here, called them pantera and tigre, very common names for just big cats. And because of that, tigre has stuck in the Central American Spanish, so that instead of being called jaguars, they are called tigre. So there is that interesting facet of that story just now. He mentions on the next page that jaguar worship was hardly confined to the tropical lowlands where the spotted cat prowled most often. Around AD 1200 on highland Mexico's comparatively cool and arid central plateau, where wild jaguars were still being seen in 2009, an aggressive and power-hungry society began to dominate and absorb other cultural groups. And then he goes on to discuss the Aztecs and how they too gave the jaguar a prominent role in origin stories and considered the animal of holy origins. George C. Vaillant, the anthropologist, apparently described how the first god of creation, Tezcatlipoca, was transformed into the sun while fearless jaguars roamed Earth. The felids killed and ate the humans and giants who then populated our planet. He goes on to say that Quetzalcoatl succeeded in knocking his adversary into the sea, from which Tezcatlipoca emerged as the great jaguar. As his fur dried before he returned to the heavens, shiny black spots appeared on his coat. They remain visible in the constellation we now call the Great Bear, Ursa Major, but known to the Aztec as Great Jaguar. In this Aztec origin story, the Earth world is named Nahui Jaguar, for jaguar, one of a 4-part cluster of primary elements that includes fire, water, and wind. He then goes on to say that a spiritual link with the spotted cat is reiterated through Aztec royalty's establishment of an elite military order called the Jaguar Knights, sometimes referred to as the Tiger or Ocelot Knights. The discrepancy in names derives from the original Aztec word for jaguar, ocelotl. Over time, ocelot became the preferred term for describing the small spotted cat overlapping much of the jaguar's range. Warriors of the Jaguar Knights, which could be identified by their pelts and masks they wore in combat, were allowed to take part in Aztec war councils, clan cabinets, and regal summit meetings. They paid neither taxes nor tribute, and the finest among them were rewarded generously with land grants and war booty. So that's a really cool way in which the Jaguars were mythologized and honored by the peoples that lived near them. And the Aztec kind of got there late, but even then they understood the strength and majesty of the creature and respected it. And there were also the Eagle Knights that had their own traditions and rites, and that this book covers that it's believed that the Eagle and Jaguar Knights represented day and night respectively. And of course, knights is a term used loosely because the Aztec wouldn't have had a system quite like the European knights, but it's still pretty cool. Later, in page 216, the chapter Our Namesake is Protected, it discusses how Jaguars were respected and honored in the modern era because the car is named after them. It features a picture Sir William Lyons, the British founder of Jaguar Cars Limited, poses next to one of his company's stylish XJ models. Lyons, who died in 1985, picked the Jaguar name because of its association with elegance and power. So, what it discusses here is that there's more to a Jaguar car than flash. For decades, a portion of company earnings helped its namesake survive in the wild. Beginning in the mid-1980s, the manufacturer donated millions of dollars for scientific research and environmental education related to the flesh and blood animal. The car company began its support of Jaguar conservation through an initiative launched by Jaguar Canada, whose executives showed particular concern about the disappearance of Panthera onca, which is the scientific name of the jaguar. A substantial financial contribution by Jaguar Canada helped the World Wildlife Fund, in cooperation with Alan Rabinowitz, there's that name again, and the Belize Audubon Society, to create the world's first jaguar sanctuary in the Coxcomb Basin of southern Belize. The company went on to donate $1 million over a 5-year period to the New York-based Wildlife Conservation Society for expansion of the nonprofit organization's jaguar studies in Guatemala, Mexico, Costa Rica, Belize, and other countries. The automaker also helped underwrite an unprecedented 1999 Mexico meeting of prominent jaguar researchers that yielded panel discussions, a bilingual reference book, and a commitment to help maintain safe corridors between major jaguar habitats from north to south. Without this type of financial support, attendee Rabinowitz noted approvingly, we're not going to be able to save these animals. On page 24 is this picture of Alan Rabinowitz. The caption, President and CEO of the Panthera Foundation, began his jaguar field research in Belize in 1983 and is now working to save several of the world's largest cats from extinction. Rabinowitz is a major figure in feline protections and conservation, and I mentioned him in last week's video, and I'm mentioning him again in this week's video because he is that important a name, and his inclusion in this book and that section I read is fascinating. There are a lot of other portions to this book I think you should read, but like I said, it is very dense, it is very small font size, it is slow, but it is educational, it is important, and it is enthusiastic about the jaguar and how it can be protected and how it can be saved and how we can conserve it, both its land, its prey, and its population itself. So this is a fantastic book. I bought it for $9. I thought it was worth it. I've read it several times, though I haven't really read it in the last 5 years. I've read it back in the 2010s. several times. So it's a good book, and I think if you are interested in learning about jaguars, not just about mountain lions or bears or wolves or any other carnivore I cover in this channel, this book about jaguars is going to do a lot for you. So yeah, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.